In a speaking exam, when you answer a question, one basic structure is opinion, reason, example. For example, is it a good idea to go running for exercise? In my opinion, it's a good idea because running is good for your heart. For example, my uncle is 90 years old and very healthy due to the fact that he runs every day. For my opinion, I signaled, I gave a sign with, in my opinion. What about the signal for the reason? I said, because and due to the fact that. And to signal an example, I said, for example. In most exams, they like it when you use different signaling expressions, and they don't like it if you repeat them. For example, I think that because, for example, I think that because, for example, I think that because, for example. So, my advice is to learn 2 new signaling expressions for opinion, reason, and example, and practice using them to answer questions. When you feel okay with these 2 new expressions, then you can choose more. Let me give you an example. Is it a good idea to go running for exercise? My take on this is, it's a good idea as running is good for your heart. One good example of this is my uncle, who's 90 years old and very healthy since he runs every day. Is it a good idea to go to university? The way I see it, it's an excellent idea to go to university. The main reason for this is, if you go to uni, you can get a good job. Let's take, for example, my friends Jing and Kostya. Jing went to university and has a good job, whereas Kostya didn't go and now has a bad job. So, let's practice the 2 opinion signaling expressions. The way I see it, the way I see it, the way I see it, I see it, I see it, I see it, the way I see it, the way I see it, the way I see it. Next expression, my take on this is. My take on this is, this is, this is. My take on this is, my take on this is, my take on this is. So, question, is it good? My take on this is, it's good. My take on this is, it's good. The way I see it, is this good? The way I see it, it's good. The way I see it, it's good. The way I see it. Okay, now the reason expressions. So 2 of them, since and as and because, these 3, one word, easy. It's good because it helps. It's good since it helps. It's good as it helps. 3 words, same meaning, because. The expression I used, the main reason for this is, for this is, for this is, not for this is, for this is, for this is, for this is. Main reason for this is, main reason for this is, the main reason for this is, the main reason for this is, the main reason for this is. If it's difficult for you to say for this is, for this is, then practice for this is, for this is, for this is, for this is. Reason for this is, reason for this is, reason for this is. Main reason for this is, main reason for this is. The main reason for this is, the main reason for this is. And the last one, the example, we have, for example, not for example, for example, and one good example of this is, example of this is, example of, example of, example of, example of, example of, example of this is, this is, this is, this is, example of, this is, example of, this is, this is, example of this is, example of this is, example of this is, example. One good example of this is. 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 And the last one, let's take for example. Let's take for example. For example. For example. Let's take for example. Let's take for example. So, I'll ask you a question. Practice answering this question with these signaling expressions. And don't forget intonation. Is it a good idea to practice speaking before a speaking test? So press pause and answer the question.
Is it a good idea to practice speaking before a speaking test?
Well, the way I see it, it's definitely a good idea. The main reason for this is if you don't practice, then you won't do a good job. One good example of this is myself. I didn't practice for my Russian speaking test, and it was very difficult, and I didn't get a good result. Next question, press pause.
Why don't some people exercise?
When I answer, I'll use new or different signaling expressions for opinion, reason, and example. So listen.
Why don't some people exercise?
Well, I think the most common reason for this is the fact that people are so busy nowadays. One pertinent example of this is a student of mine who studies and studies and studies, and when she doesn't study, she works, so she has no time. So the opinion expression was I think. There's no problem with I think, or because, or for example. Just try and use different expressions as well. The reason one, the most common reason for this is, and example one, pertinent example of this is. Last question, press pause and answer.
Why don't some people think about the environment?
Listen for my different signaling expressions. Well, I reckon to some extent it's because people need to think about other things so much. One example that springs to mind is my friend Pasha. He has a lot of stress and a lot of problems and not much money, and as a result he can't think about the environment, mainly because he needs to think about these things. Okay, so I reckon, informal, very common. I reckon it's good, I reckon it's bad. Reason. To some extent it's because. To some extent it's because. To a large extent it's because. And mainly because, or mostly because, or partly because, or partially because. Example. One example that springs to mind. 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 The first example that springs to mind. The first example that springs to mind. So, ask yourself more questions and practice answering using these three different types of signaling expressions.